So hi everyone, I'm Maddie. I'm the study manager for Sunflower. I'll have spoken to most of you during your SIV, or yeah, as Jane said, I'm the one at the end of lots of the emails. So we're just going to give you a few points about some study progress updates. And so I'm just going to start with kind of map of our sites, just to sort of recognise the huge number of sites that we have participating, and also that we now have sites in every nation of the UK. So we have sites in England, Scotland, Northern Ireland and Wales. So that's a really great achievement for the study. So we've now done 52 site initiation visits, and as of the middle of October, we've got 49 sites that we have been able to give the green light to start recruitment. And so most of our initiation visits took place like this, over a Zoom call or a WebEx call. But this is a picture from when we went to visit the team in Bath, and we did their initiation visit face-to-face with them. I'm going to pass over to Marcus now. He's going to run through a bit of information about screening and recruitment in the study.
Thanks, Maddie. Yeah, we shouldn't underestimate how exciting that was to actually leave our offices and go to Bath and have a day out. And that feels like a very distant world now. But yeah, it was good. We even had coffee and everything, Maddie, didn't we?
We did. It was great.
So I think I probably met most of you through the virtual site initiation visits, and in those I talked about the things that we'd be doing to try and help support recruitment. And one of the key things was that we were going to look at the data that you input to the screening logs. So I'm just going to very quickly walk you through some details of what the screening logs looked like up to a couple of weeks ago. And just pull out a couple of things that are interesting. I don't really want to dwell on them while I talk now. I thought what would be useful was if you could bear some of these things in mind when you go to your breakout groups and discuss there, and inevitably some of those things will be relevant to you. But first of all, we looked at how many patients had been entered as screened, and there were over 4,500 just, and 1,000 of those were ineligible. And I've just highlighted that the one reason that sort of jumped out at us a little bit that was maybe worth considering, and that was that quite a number of people, well, a third of those who were ineligible were recorded as ineligible because they'd had an MRCP within the last 3 months. And I'm not clinical myself, so I don't understand the finer details of why that might be, but I just thought that was an interesting point to raise, that we're losing a third of the patients that are ineligible because they've had an MRCP. If anybody had anything they wanted to say about that now, then they could. I'll just pause for a second and let anyone comment.
No one else does, I might, but go on.
Well, I'm just thinking, what is the reason for previous MRCP? First 3 months is obviously artificial line. It doesn't mean anything. Could be 3 weeks, could be 12 months. You can have drop a stone within whatever 1 hour after MRCP. I wouldn't use it as a exclusion criteria. I don't know, it's obviously up to you guys, but the fact that MRCP was done within the last 3 months, I think should not be exclusion criterion, I think.
But I mean, I think this highlights the problem that we have out there, because I think I suspect it's even worse right now because we're not recruiting into Sunflower, therefore lots of people are getting MRs, arguably unnecessarily. But I think once we get real momentum in the 50 centres of this study, fewer clinicians will be asking for MRCPs and fewer patients hopefully will be bouncing back with more and more pain. I suspect during COVID, that the percentage of MRCP patients is who bounce back. No one got an operation for about 6 months, did they? Literally, no one. Mm-hmm. So people will have bounced back into A&E, and they've already had an MRCP. So it actually doesn't surprise me. that so many people have already had MRCPs. But I think once this trial, this study kicks in, that would significantly reduce. That's my first comment. My second comment is, I take your point about a 3-month cutoff. It's a line we drew. I don't think we can include people who've had a recent MRCP, because I think it's, if you like, cheating. It's cheating the study. It means you already have a good idea whether they do or don't have bile duct stones before they enter the study. So I take the criticism of the 3-month cutoff, but we could have made it 6 months. We could have made it a month. I don't know what the right answer is, but we've made it 3 months.
Andy's got a comment. Andy, did you want to say something? I'm looking out for hands waving, Giles.
Jane, I was just going to say exactly what Giles' first point. If you've got strong buy-in in your centre, then as the trial goes on, there should be less MRCPs performed out with the study.
It's always so interesting how trials change practice during the trial. So I love that. Marcus, did you have your hand up?
Me?
Yeah.
No.
You just had a hand wave on your screen.
Did I?
Yeah.
I don't know how I've done that. Sorry. No, I'm ready to move on, I suppose. Now I've got the floor. Next slide, Maddie, please. So then the next thing we looked at was how many of the eligible people were approached for the study. And as you can see, we got 3,003. We had 3,300 eligible people. You would hope all 3,300 would be approached or given a PIL. It's inevitable with those numbers that a few do miss the cut. I just wanted to flag up that there were only 115 patients who weren't interested. So presumably that means when the research nurse or whoever from the research team sort of waved the PIL at them, they said, oh no, I don't want to be bothered with that. And that to me strikes quite a low number. So I suppose, again, it's another point to emphasise how this is a positive study. It's not seen as problematic for the patient group. We tend to see higher numbers than that in a lot of the studies. Next slide, Maddie, please. Then the next stage of the process of recruiting patients is actually approaching them. So there's always a little bit of a fine line between what one centre might call approaching and another might call giving a PIL, but we capture both. And I just wanted to flag that we lost a few people because the patient wanted standard care. Now that might be the subtlety of what you're able to record on the screening log, but as I understand it, the standard care could be either or both option in this situation. But I'm not going to labour on that particularly, because as you can see, the numbers approached are still really good. So just click on to the next one as well, Maddie, please. And that just gives you the whole picture, if you like, and what the consort diagram looks like and where patients have dropped out. And I suppose the headline is really that these are really good numbers, and it's just worth pausing on those figures just to, like Jane said, I suppose, to celebrate the momentum that built up with this study. Nearly 3/4 of the people who were approached consented, said yes. Very few people said no to taking part in the study. And when you drill into the reasons why people didn't consent, some of those are actually reasons of ineligibility as well. You get these slight muddles of data recording. So it's people who actually decide not to have surgery at all. They feel like they're not in sufficient pain to warrant surgery and they'd rather wait and see. So I suppose, like I say, it's just a chance to pause and applaud and celebrate how well the study has been going. Thanks, Maddie. Next one. Oh, this is me as well, isn't it? So we've talked about this over the time, haven't we, about encouraging you to enter your details onto the study database so you can get recognition. So this is what we think the activity looks like. So we think 11% of patients have been screened by a consultant, 16% by a trainee, over half by a research nurse or practitioner, and then 17% of other unknown people. I suspect that means we haven't quite tracked down whether it's a GMC number or an NMC number or something else. Next, clicks, Maddie, please. And then when you look across who's been giving patients information, who's approaching them, consultant figures are pretty much the same for both. Trainees are similar-ish. Research nurse numbers are similar-ish as well, I suppose. And then the last one, who's consented and randomised. Yeah, so it looks slightly higher on the consultant than the trainee. We've actually broken these down into a bit more detail into elective and emergency patients. And I think what was interesting in that was that the trainees, who perhaps at the start we'd anticipated dealing more with emergency patients, had actually been contributing as much as consultants to electives as well. So that's another feather in the cap for the trainees and their role on the study. So again, thank you for that. And Natalie's dialed in a talk later on where she's going to talk a bit more about the trainees' involvement. But if you just click to the next slide, Maddie, and this is just to remind you that this is the place where you need to enter your details. So Giles has always said all along that this is a very an inclusive study, and we want to recognise the contributions of everybody who's been involved in it. So if you want to be recognised, you do need to get your number entered onto the screening log. I don't know if you wanted to add anything just to reinforce that, Giles.
Yeah, absolutely. I think things are slightly improving, but we need, PIs, research nurses, please emphasise to particularly the trainees. I suspect the trainees need to be badgered about this more than anything, and they probably arguably need it more than anyone on their CVs and their assessments and all the rest of it. But, just get them to put their GMC number on at least one of the CRFs so that we can recognise their input. Yeah, I mean, what we have to remember is, as we've already said, we've got 50 associate PIs now, which is absolutely fantastic, and twice as many as any other trial. So without doubt, the trainees are helping hugely towards this recruitment, but we're only seeing 11% of the patients having a trainee next to the name. So there's still an issue, but we've got a long way to go. So there's plenty of time to correct this, but please keep encouraging those guys to put their numbers down.
Thank you, Giles. And then Maddie, I think it's back to you now.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Marcus. So I've just got a couple of slides now about data collection. I just wanted to pull out a few things that I thought were of interest relating to the collection of data within the study. So the first one relates to the 90-day follow-up CRF, which has already been mentioned. So this is a CRF that we brought in partway through the study. It's the D forms, if you're familiar with completing the CRFs. The idea of this was to collect information about patient admissions and A&E attendances and outpatient appointments in the 90 days that followed their surgery. So the reason that we brought this CRF in is that the safety data for the study is due to come from routine data, so from NHS Digital, and there's similar ones in the devolved nations as well. But if you have any experience with NHS Digital, you know that it can take a while. So we haven't yet had the routine data come through. And so what we asked is that the site started to complete this 90-day follow-up form so that we could collect some safety data. So we asked you to do some retrospective data collection and then also to continue to complete the forms prospectively. So the reason I wanted to show this was really just to highlight how well completed these forms would be, and just to say a huge thank you to all of you. So if you look at the graph, then basically how full the bar is with orange shows how complete, how very complete the forms are. for the patients we would expect them for. This is the first half of sites, and then this is the second half. We have so many sites, you can never fit them all onto one slide. But as you can see, the completeness of these forms has been really high, and the right-hand column, the overall, and we've had over 97% of these D forms that we would expect have been completed. So really I've put this here just to say a huge thank you to all of you for completing these forms, and also just to emphasise that they are really important. They are currently the safety data for our patients in this 90-day period. So that tells us whether the patients in both groups are safe to continue. So please do keep completing the D forms when I nag you about them. So thank you very much.
Can I just add to that, Maddie? Can I just, so yeah, when Maddie says that shows our safety data, so what we don't see, none of us on this call see, is that safety data by group, and our independent data monitoring committee see the actual safety data split by whether the patients had an MRCP or not, and so they can tell whether the study is safe to continue or not. So it's really important, as Maddie says, it's brilliant we've got such good follow-up data.
Thank you, Jane.
Thanks, Jane.
And so the other thing about data collection that I wanted to flag was just around the questionnaires. So you may remember that we are asking patients in the study to complete quality of life questionnaires. So the way we've been running this is that we took an initial sample of sites. So we had 7 sites, and they completed questionnaires with all of their study participants for a 6-month period. And the idea was that we would then rotate to another sample of sites. At the moment, we don't actually have any sites completing baseline questionnaires because we felt that in light of COVID, it was just not necessary at this time. But we will eventually be asking all of you to complete questionnaires with your patients for a 6-month period. So at site, we ask you to complete the baseline questionnaire, so that's at the time of consent, and then also the index admission questionnaire when the patient comes for lap chole. And then all of the follow-up time points are administered by us in Bristol at the coordinating centre. So if we just have a look at the data from our first 7 sites, we can see that the baseline questionnaire completeness is really good. It's around 80%, so that's pretty good completeness. Then if we look at the 3 and 6 months follow-up time points, they're both under 60%, so it's a little lower than we would like. As a study team, we're currently exploring why we think that might be. So one issue that we highlighted is that patients that hadn't had their surgery yet, that were 3 or 6 months after being randomised, they thought that that we wouldn't be interested in their quality of life information, whereas we want to collect it from patients regardless of whether or not they've had their surgery. So we've made some changes to the documents that go out with the questionnaires to highlight that we would like all patients to complete them. So hopefully that might increase our follow-up rate. We also know that quite a lot of these patients were just able to return to normal life once they've had their lap chole. So that might mean they're a bit less engaged with the study. So it might be something to consider when your site does start to complete questionnaires with patients, just to emphasise that these follow-up questionnaires are really important to the study. The other time point here is our index admission questionnaire, and the completion for that is less than 25%. So that's a bit of a concern for us as a study team. So having explored the data for this, there's quite a lot of reasons that are related to COVID. So patients are being admitted for their surgery at private hospitals or different hospitals to where the research team are. So they're not able to find out when these patients come in until maybe after the event. And also with research teams being redeployed, there's less staff on the ground to kind of check when these patients are due to come in and so give them the questionnaires. But it might just be something for you to think about either now or during the breakout sessions as and when you are completing these questionnaires, how might you be able to manage these patients coming in for surgery so that you can complete questionnaires with them. So it's just kind of there as something to consider. So they're my 2 little points about data collection. And then our next couple of slides are around the restart of recruitment. So as you know, we took the decision back in March to pause recruitment at all sites in light of COVID. So we were then on pause until July, and from the 1st of July, sites were able to restart recruitment. And that was if they had completed their restart checklist and sent it back to us. That was checking various things like local research nurse capacity, radiology, and that the local R&Ds were happy for you to get started. So we've had 27 sites who've had the green light to start recruiting again. And of those, 15 sites have randomized at least one patient since restarting. So just to kind of have a zoomed in look at some of those recruitment graphs that Giles showed you back up at the top of the meeting. So we can see that until the pause, our orange recruitment line was tracking quite nicely against target. And then you can see when we went on pause and we kind of flattened out. And then you can see, if I zoom in, you can see our recruitment since we restarted in July. So obviously, it's quite far away from the target line, but I think ignoring the target line, what this shows is that it's been amazing that throughout this period, we've been able to see recruitment, that sites have been recruiting patients, and we're really grateful to everyone for their efforts. Our current intention is to keep the study open so that we can continue to recruit any patients that are possible during this time. So again, just to say thank you to those sites who have been recruiting. And this is our 15 sites who have recruited since we came out of the pause of recruitment. And I think something that's quite interesting to flag is over on the right-hand side, we've got the split between urgent and elective. So Giles mentioned earlier that as an overall for the study, the urgent recruitment was around 20%, but we can see since the restart, we're actually getting closer to 40% of patients are being recruited through the urgent pathway. So that's quite interesting and might be something to consider during the breakout sessions. There's also something that Marianne will be talking about in her presentation. I'm just going to pass back to Marcus now for a last few slides that are related to COVID challenges.
Yeah, okay, I won't spend long on this one. This was just some of the challenges that we know from talking to people that you've been experienced, and you know, some of the reasons centres have given for not reopening are those things we put there about COVID research being prioritised, lack of capacity, change to clinics not happening, and so on. And some of the centres have opened in name, but perhaps not in body as well, if you like, because of other challenges that are going on. So let's just move on to the next one, Mandy. And it was just, again, to feed into your group discussions that you're going to have in a moment, is to think about some of the things that were working pre-COVID and whether you could, you know, apply those when we do get to a point where we're getting going again. So the issue around radiology capacity, I think the centres that were doing well are the ones where the PI had been able to engage with the radiology lead, as Giles describes it, having to wander down the corridor and going and having a chat with radiology about the study and getting them on board. You know, those centres that do that have been doing really well, and that could help work through some of the backlogs. The lack of face-to-face clinics, I suppose, is inevitable for us all, isn't it, post-COVID and while COVID carries on. So Maddie and the trial management team have put in place ethics amendments so you're able to do telephone consultations with patients and get consent in that way as well. So in some ways, we hope we've mitigated for that challenge. And then the final one, I don't know whether this is, you know, might this just be naive, but the fact that research nurses are being redeployed onto other studies, whether there is scope for trainees to develop their role beyond just screening and recruiting patients and doing some of the data entry as well, if that's the thing that research nurses are doing. I guess you'll know from your own individual centre level of what's viable. So really that was just to put some things out there as food for thought when you're in your breakout sessions, to have a few ideas and a few discussions about those things. But that's all from us. Maddie, do you want to go from there?
Yeah, thank you, Marcus. Yeah, are there any questions from anyone related to those?
I had a question for everyone. It slipped past me when we prepared the slides earlier, and that's Maddie and Marcus made these very tactfully anonymous. Did you notice there was Centre 1, Centre 2, Centre 3, Centre 4 on the questionnaire response rate slide? I was wondering whether people would, for the next meeting, rather have them by centre, because league tables can be quite powerful. No one knows which centre they were, so
we could see the names since COVID, couldn't we? The names are there, weren't they?
you could see the recruitment names. It was the questionnaire response rates, which I noticed they've been anonymised.
Yeah.
Well, we might play with that next time. We'll see.
Well, I mean, if you think you'd be at the top of that league table, let us know and we'll tell you if you are or not. How about that?
Or if you want your data, we can give your individual data.